All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Did a Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be continuing on the path of righteousness, which effectively means we're going to continue talking about the new Paladin subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And today, we are going to be talking about the Oath of the Watchers. Just a really quick primer on how 5th edition class design works. Every single class should play very differently right from the beginning. In order to do that, each class has what are called the defining features, or at least what we call the defining features, and those features should show up within the first two levels. For the Paladin, the defining features of the Paladin are its ability to lay on hands, which is effectively a pool of hit points that they can just give out. No rolling required, no saves to make. They just get to give out hit points, which makes them okay healers, but more effective at just being able to keep people pushing forward. As opposed to just healing the party and keeping them alive totally. So it's a little more kind of offensive form of healing, I guess you could say. In addition to that, paladins have the ability to smite. It is something that is relatively uniquely paladin. Hexblade warlocks get something similar if they take an invocation for it, but it's paladins that are most well known for their ability to smite. So generally, most subclasses are going to improve one of those two things, or just improve a defining feature somehow. So let's see how the Oath of the Watchers does that. First things first, I like the idea of the Oath of the Watchers. The Ranger got in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. The Ranger got this really cool subclass called the Horizon Walker. It's one of my personal favorite subclasses of a Ranger, simply because I like the idea. You know, this is a specific ranger that hunts extraplanar creatures, and because of that, it has all these really cool extraplanar abilities. It gets the ability to teleport using Misty Step. It can detect portals. It has a mechanic that's similar to Hunter's Mark. Which again I've mentioned before. I'm not a huge fan of Hunter's Mark being a spell rather than a ability. So there's just really cool things that a Horizon Walker can do. A Oath of the Watchers Paladin is effectively the holy version of the Horizon Walker, in that, you know, it is a paladin whose prime focus is fighting extraplanar creatures. So that right from the get-go, I think is really interesting. I think from kind of the lore of the paladin, where they are kind of mighty protectors and enforcers of the will of their deities, I think that adds for an interesting idea, because extraplanar creatures, you know, interacting with the prime material plane and, you know, messing up plans for your deity, I think is a very valid thing to be worried about. So lore-wise, I think this is really cool. Let's actually jump into the actual features of the subclass. First things first, like all paladins, when you choose your oath, you get an expanded spell list. Again, this one's a pretty basic. Most of them are going to kind of relate to dealing with extraplanar creatures, which a lot of people would think extraplanar as like aberrations and things like that. You know, a Mind Flayer's Gith. But extraplanar is literally anything just not from the prime material plane. So fays, fiends, Elementals, obviously, so it's a relatively wide net that it casts, and the spells that they get are kind of things you would expect. Things like Detect Magic, Counterspell, Moonbeam, Banishment. I mean, why wouldn't they get Banishment? Hold Monster, all stuff that kind of makes sense. I am a little bit surprised that they don't add Misty Step, simply because, again, you tend to see anytime you're dealing with kind of a planar style class, they generally give them some sort of teleportation option, just because that is kind of a very extra planar thing, stepping into another plane of existence to increase your movement. It kind of makes sense. So I was a little bit surprised they didn't have it, and again, for me personally, I like teleporting characters. I really enjoy playing characters that can teleport. Yeah, that's the only thing I was like, interesting. I don't think it's bad. I'm just like, interesting. The other thing you get as a paladin when you choose your oath is you get your channel divinity options. Now, like we mentioned in the last video, channel divinity works a little differently for a paladin than it does for a cleric. Clerics get multiple uses of channel divinity as they get to higher levels. Paladins only get one use of channel divinity, but it resets on a short rest. So in general, just from the games that I've played, I don't generally see a whole lot of parties taking more than maybe one short rest in an adventuring day. I know technically you can take more than that, but just my own experiences, it's generally one. So in a lot of times, clerics are going to just use their channel divinity more often, especially since I've talked about this before. Anytime you have a single use of something, even if it's something that resets on a short rest, players are always going to be more stingy with that ability than if you have two uses of something, even if those two uses aren't reset unless you take a long rest. So in general, I see a lot more clerics using their channel divinity than paladins. That being said, let's actually talk about the channel divinity options. The first channel divinity is Watcher's Will, which is, as an action, you choose a number of creatures you can see within 35 feet of you, up to a number equal to your charisma modifier, which is the paladin spellcasting ability. And then for a minute, you and the chosen creatures have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. This makes a lot of sense for a paladin that is fighting against extra planar creatures. Because especially when you start talking about the abyss and fiends and the devils specifically, mind control and things like that tend to be really common. Psychic damage tends to be really common. A lot of those will use intelligence or wisdom-based saving throws. Fey creatures have this thing for charms. All of those are wisdom-based saving throws. Every so often, you'll see a charisma saving throw. They're exceedingly rare. So it does make sense, but by far, wisdom is going to be the saving throw that they will use the most. And having advantage for a minute can be super useful. It's also useful against any creature that uses fear. Dragons are real famous for their fear abilities, and fear is a wisdom save. So that I can see having a lot of legs depending on the situation, just because intelligence, wisdom, charisma, that it's literally half the abilities you have, despite the fact that dexterity saving throws make up the majority of saving throws in 5e. That's still the combination of intelligence, wisdom, and charisma makes this a pretty useful ability just in general. The other thing they get is Abjure, the extra planar, which is, as an action, you present your holy symbol, and each aberration, celestial, elemental, fey, or fiend within 35 feet of you that can hear you must make a wisdom save, and on a failed save, they're turned for a minute or until it takes damage. Turn Undead is a cleric's staple. It has been a cleric's staple since clerics were first introduced. And it's just part of being a cleric is the ability to turn undead. Turning a creature is different than just casting fear on it or inflicting it with fear. Turning is just an incredibly useful thing. A turn creature must spend its turn trying to move away, as far away from you as it can, and it can't willingly end its move in a space within 30 feet of you. And then for its action, it can only use the dash action or try to escape from an effect that prevents it from moving. If there's nowhere to move, the creature can take the dodge action. So unlike fear, where it just gives them disadvantage on attack rolls if they can see you, and they can't move closer to you. A turn creature loses their action. They have to use their action to either run or dodge, and they're only allowed to dodge if they can't run. So turn from an action economy standpoint is really, really useful, especially since this targets each aberration, celestial, elemental, fey, or fiend. This, it doesn't have a maximum limit of creatures it can affect. So this is one of those abilities that, as long as your party's working together, can be extremely effective, especially since turn creatures don't get to continue making saves. They're just turned for a minute or until they take the damage. So extremely effective in very specific circumstances. Now, again, aberration, celestial, elemental, fey, or fiend. That is a lot of monsters, but there's a lot of monsters that don't fall into that category. And that's kind of a theme we're going to see with this, is that all of their abilities tend to focus on just those kinds of monsters, meaning if you're not playing a campaign that uses those kinds of monsters, or you're just a part of the campaign when you're not using it, basically a lot of this subclass is kind of useless. So that I think is less than useful. And a good example of how they could have avoided that with Watcher's Will. It doesn't specifically say things like, spells cast from Fey, Fiend, blah, blah. No, it gives you advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, Charisma saves, which a lot of different creatures can use. However, when you're looking at those particular types of creatures, they tend to use those saving throws, or force you to make those as saving throws a lot more. So targeting the abilities instead of the creatures themselves gives you some use for those abilities outside when you're in a battle with very specific creatures. It kind of has the favored enemy problem from previous editions, where favored enemy would give you additional damage against a certain type of creature. But if you never fought that creature, favored enemy was pointless. And I'm kind of seeing that with this, though it's not quite as specialized as a favorite enemy. All right, going to 7th level, you get Aura of the Sentinel. You emit an aura of alertness when you aren't incapacitated. When you and any creatures of your choice within 10 feet of you roll initiative, you all gain a bonus to initiative equal to your proficiency bonus, and at 18th, the range increases to 30 feet. That is super useful. Winning initiative can mean the difference between how many actions a side is going to get. If you focus fire one of the weaker enemies, they may not do a ton of damage, but by taking away those actions from the action economy, you are putting yourself on a huge advantage comparably to spreading out the damage or allowing them to get their attacks in and then attacking them. So anything that improves your initiative is always useful. This does give the Paladin an incentive when traveling to travel towards the middle of the party, which isn't really a Paladin thing. A lot of times Paladins are in the front, especially if you're a sword and board kind of Paladin. They tend to be towards the front, so anyone that attacks from the front will have to fight the Paladin instead of like the squishy wizard or something. So it will kind of encourage you to play your Paladin a little bit differently, but by the time you get the 30-foot range, your party is just always going to roll initiative plus your proficiency bonus, which is kind of again, paladins are known for their auras in previous editions. The only reason I don't call it a defining feature is they don't get their first aura until I think like 5th or 6th level. But that is a very paladin thing, is having auras. So yeah. So going to 15th level, you get Vigilant Rebuke. Whenever a creature you can see within 30 feet of you succeeds on an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saving throw, you can use your reaction to deal 2d8 plus your charisma modifier force damage to the creature that forced the saving throw. This is really, really nice. First of all, it turns your reaction into something that you can use constantly. There's no limitation to this. It's not you can use this as many times as your charisma modifier, your proficiency bonus. This is literally every turn, as long as your allies are making their saving throws against intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. You can use this, and 2d8 plus your charisma is not a small amount of damage. So in that aspect, it's really nice. It improves the action economy because it gives you a use for your reaction. The issue being, again, it's intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saves. Any bad guy that's got an intelligence of at least like 8 is probably not going to use a spell that requires intelligence, wisdom, or charisma more than once if they're going to be hit by 2d8 plus a charisma modifier to the damage. And again, if you're dealing with creatures that have abilities or spells that do that, in general, they're going to have abilities that don't use any of those because, again, they're significantly rarer than your just kind of standard dexterity saves for most magic attacks. So this is another one that is limited. It is nice in the idea that, again, it's not targeting spells cast by fiends or fae or something like that. So it is a little bit more wide spread. But it is still kind of limited. And if you have a vindictive DM, it'd be really easy to make this 15th level of ability completely useless by just never having your enemies use intelligence, wisdom, or charisma-based saving throw abilities. There's just so much out there. So good for a 15th level of ability. I don't really see a way to improve it much. I can see it just not being used a ton, which is a little bit upsetting, but it's still really powerful. You know, the 2d8 still makes it a useful thing to use. So yeah, not super amazing good, not bad by any standard, just kind of okay. That's an ability. Finally, to the 20th level is called Mortal Bulwark. Now, we've talked about this before. Paladins at 20th level always get a transformation ability or a super mode ability. It is it generally works. It's a bonus action. It generally lasts for a minute, and it will give them different things. I've mentioned the Vengeance Paladin gets this really cool thing where he sprouts wings and he has this aura of terror. Like, it's really, really cool. The Mortal Bulwark gets the following features for a minute. You gain True Sight with a range of 120 feet. You have advantage on attack rolls against aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, and fiends. And when you hit a creature with an attack roll and deal the damage to it, you can also force it to make a charisma saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failed save, the creature is magically banished to its native plane of existence if it's not currently there. On a successful save, the creature can't be banished by this feature for 24 hours. And then you can't use it again until you finish a long rest, or you expend a 5th level spell slot to use it again, which is new, I believe. Most transformations don't let you burn a spell slot. You only get it once per short rest. I may be wrong about that. I'd have to look at the PHB ones, but I don't remember that being a thing, because that is a Tasha's thing. So, so I have some reservations with this. True Sight is super, super useful. What True Sight is, you can see in normal and magical darkness. That's really nice. You can see invisible creatures and objects. That's even nicer. You automatically detect visual illusions and succeed on saving throws against them, which is basically a lot of illusions to spells that cause damage are visual. So you effectively, with True Sight, you are immune to a lot of illusion magic, which is really, really nice, especially since some of the high-end illusions spells can do some pretty epic stuff. So that's kind of interesting. You can also perceive the original form of a shape changer or a creature that's transformed by magic, and you can see into the ethereal plane within the same range. So that is a ton of stuff. Like, True Sight is massively useful in a ton of different situations. So that in and of itself is really, really nice. Everything else about this, again, is limited completely to aberrations, celestials, elementals, phase, and fiends. Which means if you're not fighting one of those creatures, most of Mortal Bulwark is useless. Now, this can be battle ending, because you can simply hit one of those creatures and banish it permanently. Like, there isn't like it comes back after a minute or something like that. No, you can take one swing of your sword and just banish. So when you are facing these creatures on the prime material plane, you can take out a lot of creatures really, really fast. The other thing that's nice about it is it's you hit a creature with an attack roll and deal damage. So if you took the Blessed Warrior fighting style that we talked about before, this means you can use one of those ranged attacks. Which actually no, because they're not attack rolls. Never mind. Yeah, I'm trying to think if paladins have any attack spells where they roll. I guess they don't. But if you were to take a feat that gave you sorcerer spells, would probably be the best for a paladin, simply because sorcerers, if you take Magic Initiate, sorcerers use charisma for their saving for their spellcasting. So do warlocks. So either one of those, if you took that, you could use one of their ranged spells to effectively effectively banish at range. And if you took the warlock's Eldritch Blast, you get multiple blasts that you can aim at different creatures. So theoretically, by the time you're to the 20th level, you're firing 4 Eldritch Blasts. So theoretically, you could banish 4 targets per turn, while Mortal Bulwark was active, which is pretty amazing and useful. So yeah, again, in a specific instance where you're fighting any of those creatures on the prime material plane, you are golden. However, by the time you reach 20th level, you are there's a good chance you are journeying to other planes, which makes that ability useless. Because if they're already on their plane of existence, you can't banish them. The banishment spell allows you to send them to a pocket dimension if you can't actually banish them. So it's still useful. This doesn't. Yeah, that's a huge thing, because effectively, if you're not on the prime material plane, Mortal Bulwark becomes significantly less useful. And then again, if you're not fighting one of those extra planar creatures, the only thing you get from your super awesome Paladin supercharged ability is True Sight, which again is super useful. Don't get me wrong, but there are so many situations where True Sight's not going to do a ton for you. You know, if you're fighting in daylight, and no one's throwing around magical darkness, which is not a super common thing to do, and no one's turning invisible, which does happen from time to time, but you're generally not going to fight an entire invisible combat. You're normally just going to have one, maybe two things that turn invisible. True Sight just doesn't give you as much useful things. Again, the entirety of this subclass is extremely situational. So much of this subclass relies on you being able to find an extra planar creature to fight. If you're not fighting extra planar creatures, entire level up of abilities become useless. And that's my one issue with this. Again, I like the idea behind it, and just still being a paladin is you're still going to be able to be useful when you're not using these abilities, because paladins can still smite. You still have all the regular paladin spells. But so much of this subclass is situational that I would have liked to see just a little bit more that would have a slightly broader, maybe a weakened version for broader application. But yeah, when you look at something like the Vengeance Paladin, where they get things like they get Hunter's Mark and their Oath of Enmity, their Oath of Enmity they can cast on anyone, and it's a really useful ability. These just, I mean, they are really useful and can be, clutch in certain situations. But again, a Vindictive DM could make this choice of a subclass almost completely worthless. And I don't like situations where you have to kind of rely on the DM's good graces to be able to use your abilities. I think that's poor class design. So, final thoughts. Overall, I like the class. I really do. I like the idea of it. Like I said before, I just don't like how situational some things can be. Watcher's Will can be super useful, but again, it only is going to help on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. So again, a Vindictive DM could just never use that, and you'll have wasted your channel Divinity. Abjure, the extra planar, super useful in very specific situations. Aura of the Sentinel is just useful in general. Getting a bonus to your initiative is always great. So that one is fantastic. Vigilant Rebuke, again, is very situational. It does a lot of damage, and there's no limit to it, so you can use it every single turn and just really piss off the creatures that are making these creatures make these saving throws. But if the creatures, if no one is making this as a saving throws, then you're never getting to use it. And then Mortal Bulwark, True Sight, super useful. Advantage on all attack rolls against certain creatures is like this shy of being broken, because advantage is really useful. Especially for a paladin, because the more they crit, the more they do smite crazy damage. But again, the entire third point where you can banish something requires, first of all, for it to be the right kind of creature. Second of all, requires it to be in the right place. And then third of all, they have to fail their saving throw. If they make the save, that's it. That part of Mortal Bulwark is useless for the rest of that combat, effectively. Unless they run away and you find them again on another day, you're not going to be able to use that aspect. So the True Sight is nice, and attack rolls are super useful. But again, a Vindictive DM could make it so that Mortal Bulwark is just a way for you to give yourself to True Sight. Which again is really nice, but compared to a lot of the other kind of transformation paladin abilities, it's a little bit underpowered. Yeah. Anyway, that is going to be all for today. As always, if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. It really does make a huge difference. And also hit the subscribe button so you get all of my videos right to your subscription box. In addition to that, hit the bell icon to turn on notifications, because every so often I upload things at weird times because my mental health doesn't like me. So that way you don't have to worry about missing any of my videos just because I uploaded it at 1 o'clock in the morning, because that's when I was awake. In the comments below, what is your favorite extraplanar creature? Is it a character class like tieflings or things like that? Is there a specific like devil or demon that you just really think is fun? Or are you an elemental kind of person? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, that is all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye!